Ready to go live? Okay. Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and other furries, or good evening wherever you are. I'm here as a bit of a departure from my normal videos. I have something rather important to discuss. It needs to be talked about because many are shying away from it. Many refuse to talk about it out of fear. But this country and its very way of life that we have enjoyed for centuries, built on peace and freedom, is at stake today. Now, I'm sure many of you are aware that recently we had a general election, and the election results let Labour in. People thought, everything's going to be okay. But less than a month into Parliament, Mr. Starmer, as I call him, as many call him other derogatory things, implemented some of the most authoritarian and totalitarian measures that I have ever seen in my entire life from a government. He limits free speech. He doesn't allow people who have genuine concerns about this country and its situation to protest openly. And yet, on the other side, he allows those of a certain religion to carry knives out in public. He allows those of a certain religion to protest in public without fear, which is understandable, but the main thing is that the policing is becoming two-tiered. It's one rule for them, another rule for us. And that is just completely undemocratic. Now, I don't think that the police themselves are to blame. I don't blame the officers. Who I blame is the government for enforcing this. And potentially, this isn't confirmed, but it's potentially probable that our government is twisting the arms of the head of these police forces to act on their wishes or face resignation or unlawful termination. Which means, unfortunately, in the given situation that our economy is in, they almost have no choice but to act. Now, the violence that has been going on these past few months is not as a result of far-right thuggery. Let's get that into perspective. What this is the accumulation of 27 years of the British people's patience being wasted. We've been waiting and waiting for the governments of successive governments to enact the will of the people. Each time they fumble it somehow. Labour has done many things, and so have the Conservatives. And at one point they were polar opposites on the political spectrum, but today they are one and the same, wolves in sheep's clothing. And they do not represent the people, because the people are the people who are protesting and are getting riot police responding as a result. Now, don't get me wrong, the rioting is absolutely despicable. The actual people who are going to use violence in our streets, making our towns, our cities unsafe, making our culture unsafe, That kind of rhetoric does not belong in the United Kingdom of Great Britain. Our nation, traditionally, has been about freedom, democracy, and honesty, and we have ruled for several hundred years in peace. But now that peace is being threatened, regular people are now being arrested for their views online. You can't say certain things. There is a genuine risk that this video may be taken down, may be demonetized, and may just be that I end up being arrested for this. But you know what? In all honesty, what's more important to me is seeing that this country once again prospers again. And under the current regime, it will do nothing but falter and flounder at the fact that our government clearly does not represent the will and the desires of its own peoples, its own subjects, through which traditionally the government must prevail and must adhere to. After all, they serve us, just as we serve them. But that's not the case in Keir Starmer's case. You see, what he's doing is ruling with an iron fist, much like a dictator. He is bringing in totalitarian regimed rules, such as banning freedom of speech, preventing people who have concerns from protesting, arresting people for what they say online, and letting criminals who have murdered people out early out of the prison system. People are being convicted for what they say online, and that is just disgraceful. This is not the sign of a democratic, open, capitalist societal government. This is a sign of what it truly is a Stalinist government. Because that's the thing. Labour by name, you'd think they mean the will of the people, but they really don't. They haven't done for decades. What they really are is they serve themselves. They only serve themselves and themselves or their higher-ups. The country, as we know it, as I've said, is at stake here. There are many things that they are allowed to get away with that we cannot. It is one rule for thee, one rule for me. And once again, that is a sign of a dictatorship. The Prime Minister has also said that if the riots get too bad, he has said he would be willing to bring in the armed forces into the situation. He's going around protecting mosques, but not protecting anywhere else through which this country holds dear. This country, first and foremost, is a Christian one. It is those churches that we should be protecting, the synagogues that we should be protecting, the mosques that we should be protecting. We should be protecting everybody, regular people. And yet Starmer brands regular people as far-right thugs. Yet in actuality, those protesting are actually across the entire political spectrum. There are left-wing people, there are right-wing people, there are centrist people. But according to Starmer, they're all far-right. And if they're all far-right to him, then that just shows how far left he is from everything else. The thing is, these people who are rioting, they are not actually far right at all. The ones doing the violence are more likely the actions of the far left and agitators. And I say that because if you look at the Black Lives Matter riots, their destruction is also prevalent. And when the right or the centre protests, they do so nominally peacefully and without any damage to anywhere. That in itself shows that it's possible that those leftist thugs are actually trying to make the government implement these things by giving them a reason to clamp down hard on dissent. Now, that's completely undemocratic. If you remember, during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the lockdown, they were all about trying to get Boris Johnson in prison, or at least convicted for Partygate and fined. And yet when Keir Starmer had Beergate, nothing was done of it. He went scot-free. Let's not forget that this man is also an ex-lawyer who was in charge of and friends with the former paedophile Jimmy Savile. And in addition to that, he was also in charge of the post office convictions in the early 2010s. The fact that this man also has prior records of being in communist and associated with communist regimes, such as the small groups in these universities, absolutely goes to show where his priorities lie. He was interviewed once and asked if whether or not he preferred Westminster to Davos, another place which the WEF are in charge of, or at least they have meetings there. And he said he preferred Davos to Westminster. He openly said that he prefers other subjects other than his own people to his own people, which is absolutely disgusting, and it should not be the case. A Prime Minister is meant to serve his subjects and people much like the King and Queen are, and yet he does not. Now you may be thinking, what's my purpose here? Why am I saying this? Why am I talking about this now? Well, the thing is, these riots, it may seem like the riots and protests have gone away, but in actuality they've not. They're still happening. They've just been brushed under the carpet by mainstream media. And they're also trying to get the opposition arrested. Nigel Farage, the opposition of in the Reform Party, he's had his security potentially at risk because he's apparently been nearly tried to be arrested by the police. Now, say what you will, but I'm pretty sure that that's undemocratic as well. This country, as I've mentioned, is a country of peace, of freedom, and of common sense. And over the years, those things have gone away. But heed no more. I do have advice for those whom are in the UK who do wish to protest, who do wish to stay safe. things in the United Kingdom are likely to get worse. Do not assume that they won't. And I say that because I don't want anybody to be in fear or like afraid of anything that happens from the government, because that's the one thing we can't be. The government wishes to control via fear, via agitation, and that's exactly what they've been doing under Starmer's government, at least specifically under Starmer's Labour regime. That's not true for all governments, naturally. But the thing is, he has been trying to scare people from saying things, from saying and speaking about things, which isn't British at all. Not British at all, that. So, for those who are wishing to step up to protest, do not be in fear of the government. Do not be in fear of the police. Do not blame the police. And do not even attack police officers for this. The people you should be protesting are the people in the Labour Party, and specifically Keir Starmer. Now, when you're protesting, and if you protest, you should be protesting peacefully, without any violence, and you should be cooperating with law enforcement where you can, when necessary. Do not let them or any counter-protests get under your skin. Instead, just be British, remain steadfast and unmoving in your opinions. Do not get violent, and keep safe and look after one another. If you see anybody who does get violent, you must perform a citizen's arrest on them and report them to the nearest police officers, who will then take those violent thugs away where they belong. If you do not wish to protest and you just want to remain safe during this extremely hazardous time, best things to do are avoid city centres if you can. If you know that protests are going to take place in your area, board up all your doors and windows, barricade them, lock all doors and windows, and no matter what, do not let anybody in and do not let anybody out until the protests are concluded. Stay away from any doors and windows if you can. And most important of all, once again, stay safe. Our nation has prided itself on the freedom and peace that it has afforded. It was one of the many nations that gave birth to Western civilization as we knew it, at least until the 1990s. Because since then, in the United Kingdom, things have changed, and not for the better, for the worse, gradually. And Labour has now hit the accelerator on that degradation that we are facing in this country. So what do we do? How do we deal with such a situation? Well, I'll tell you how. For one thing, we must stand united as a kingdom and as a country together with those who feel the same, and we must never be in fear of those who wish to commit crime or police through fear. What we must do is we must be open and honest with one another. We must stand together as a people, sure in our beliefs and convictions that we are what we are, and who we are is British. We may be white, we may be black, we may be Muslim, we may be Sikh, we may be Hindu, we may be Chinese, we may be Japanese, we may be any national ethnicity that is integrated into this country. We may be any one of those. But the one thing we need is to stand together to represent the will of this country and people, and to make sure that those at the top are held accountable for their actions. We will never forget there. Many, many people have died trying to prevent such a thing as we see it today from happening. Soldiers gave their lives in World War I, in World War II, and subsequent wars to try and ensure the peace and stability of the Western civilization as it is not done in vain. What would I could ask you, what would they do if they were awake and alive today? What would they say to the United Kingdom about what they fought for? What would they do if they could see what they have done with their actions? I tell you, they'd live in fear. They would be fearful. They would be terrified of what this country has turned into and what it has become. But that doesn't have to always be the case. There is still possibility that us as British people can redeem ourselves, that we can get back to what we are, who we are truly. We are a nation of peace, a nation built on trust, a nation built on democracy and on freedom throughout the world. Our nation has been a model for many democratic nations. The United States, for example, our biggest ally. A lot of their culture, laws and traditions have come from those of the United Kingdom. After all, it was once a British colony. And though we've had squabbles, we're fairly good friends. And that's the same with all European nations too. We have for so long been waiting in the wings. We have so long been so peaceful, so patient with everything happening. But that patience is running thin and dry. And soon enough that patience will run out. But I do not wish for any violence. I condemn any violence of any kind. Because the one thing that they want is violence. The one thing that we need is to stand united and together as a people. To hold the government account for what it is, a regime of Stalinist ideology, and to peacefully ensure that once again at some point things will return back to how they were. Our United Kingdom once again. Now, I do wish that everybody here stays safe and well. I also ask of all of you that have seen this to share it wherever you can, everywhere, to make sure that whomever is in doubt and wonders about the United Kingdom and its people is fully aware of what's going on, what our country needs, and what we need to fight for. Though not fight violently, I mean like fight peacefully, so protesting, I mean specifically. We need to stand united together. All of us need to stand united against the common enemy, and that common enemy is regimes that wish to harm us through indoctrination and through subversion, a Soviet tactic that was later adopted by the Chinese Communist Party. This government, as it is now, is not for the native British people who have lived and been born here and have worked here for their entire lives. This government is for Davos, for the World Economic Forum that wishes only one thing: you will own nothing and you will be happy. But that is a tangent on its own. But the WEF does have a role to play in all of this. For instance, Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, is indeed one of those people in the WEF who I've mentioned previously has connections and has said that he prefers Davos to Westminster, which is disgraceful for a leader to say that about his national people. Mr. Starmer, my message to you is this: you need to listen to your subjects, to your dignitaries, to their concerns in genuine 100% honesty. Listen to their calls. Listen to their warnings. And as the Prime Minister, you must act upon those warnings, upon those fears, those anxieties, and not on emotional responses to matters that are, though extreme, do have validity. Mr. Starmer, if you do not listen to your subjects, if you refuse to recall Parliament, then all you are doing is agitating further and proving further that you are a democratic dictator who seeks only harm to this United Kingdom of Great Britain. And although I'm not violent, I'll say this: Mr. Starmer, your time, should that happen, should you continue to not listen to your country, your time as Prime Minister and your time in the Labour Party itself may very well be short-lived. But I hope not for violence. I hope not for thuggery. I hope only for peace. So I say this: protest if you want to. Stay safe and barricade if you have to. And share this video wherever you can, across the world. It's about time our government was held to account for its mistakes, for its failure to listen to its people and dignitaries. Doing that and standing united in the face of all this turmoil should bring about our nation, as it has been and always will be, a united kingdom of Greater Britain and Northern Ireland, and also its Commonwealth nations and allies in the West. Our country is on the brink, but it doesn't have to be that way. Instead, We must stand together united and save our very way of life through protest. I thank you all for listening this long. I do appreciate it very greatly. It's been 30 minutes and I've been waffling on for quite a long time. I will address further concerns for my absence in another video at some point. But I do hope that everybody watching this video listens to the whole thing fully and shares it wherever possible, because we really need to get the word out that this country is under threat. And the more people realise and listen, the more we may have a chance at changing things around and saving this godly united kingdom. So thank you all for joining me on this rant of sorts. Well, not rant, but more specifically on my thoughts on the current situation in the UK. I will be making videos again in the future. I'm currently just dealing with a few things in real life. But all in all, do stay safe, do take care of yourselves and each other, and no violence. Do not wish violence for anybody, not even in the Labour Party. We're democratic and we're British. We don't do violence. Instead, we stand together as like a wall, standing united in our freedom and our expressions. Many people think that the United Kingdom died with the Queen, but I don't believe that's necessarily true. It doesn't have to be. Instead, we could use something like this to unite us all in peace and freedom, to try and make a change to this country, to try and ensure that once again we are a united kingdom. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure being here today, and I do hope everyone who is watching stays safe, shares this video, and most importantly, God bless the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Thank you very much.